When Michael Graves moved into his new house on the outskirts of Portland, he told himself this was the fresh start he'd been needing. After his divorce and a suffocating year in a one-bedroom apartment downtown, the small wooden house on Birch Lane felt like peace. It had a porch, a decent yard, and just enough quiet to make him forget the world for a while. He unpacked slowly, dragging boxes from the truck under a sky that looked like it might rain. It was early autumn, the kind of air that smelled like cold leaves and damp wood. Across the narrow street stood another house, bigger, older, with peeling blue paint and boarded windows. Every window was dark, except one. The upstairs right window glowed with a pale amber light. At first, Michael thought nothing of it. Maybe an old man who couldn't sleep, maybe someone working night shifts. But as the days passed, he realized something strange. The light never went out. Morning, noon, or midnight, it always burned there, warm and steady, like a small sun that refused to die. On the third evening, curiosity got the better of him. He walked across the street, beer in hand, intending to introduce himself to the neighbor. The porch creaked under his weight. He knocked once, then again. No answer. When he pressed his ear to the door, he could swear he heard something faint. A low humming sound, rhythmic and mechanical. It came from somewhere deep inside the house. A breeze moved through the street, carrying the smell of wet cedar. Michael stood there for a long minute, feeling ridiculous, then turned back home. Behind him, the light in the window flickered. Once, like a blink, and then steadied again. That night, he dreamt of standing outside the same house, staring up at that same glowing window. Only this time there was a figure there, tall, unmoving, the outline of a person behind the glass. It watched him silently, while the yellow light pulsed brighter and brighter, until everything drowned in white. He woke up sweating. The digital clock beside his bed read 3:47 a.m. Instinctively, he looked through his blinds. The light across the street still burned. The next morning, Michael stopped by the corner store for coffee and cigarettes. The cashier, a thin woman in her 60s with tired eyes, asked if he was the new guy on Birch Lane. When he nodded, she gave a dry laugh. "Bet you've noticed the house with the light." He hesitated. "Yeah, what's the deal with it?" She shook her head. "Been like that since before I moved here. Some say it's a security system that broke. Others, well, folks around here don't like to talk about it much." "Why not?" She looked at him carefully. "Because whoever goes there doesn't stay long." He tried to laugh it off, but her face didn't change. Days turned into weeks. Michael worked from home, edited design projects, and tried to ignore the creeping sense that the house across the street was watching him. When the wind rattled his windows, he thought he heard footsteps on the porch. When he looked outside, the street was always empty, except for that unwavering light. Then came Halloween night. The street was alive with kids in costumes, laughter, porch lights, and plastic pumpkins. Michael sat on his steps, handing out candy, smiling for the first time in a while. But by 10 o'clock, the neighborhood had gone quiet. Only a few porch lights remained, including, of course, the one across the street. As he gathered the empty candy bowl, he noticed something strange. The curtains in the glowing window were slightly open. He froze. For the first time, he could actually see inside. The room appeared empty, except for a wooden chair and a lamp beside it. But as he squinted, he noticed something dark resting on the chair. Something shaped like a person, slumped forward. His throat went dry. He blinked, and the shape was gone. He told himself it was a trick of the light. He went inside, poured a drink, tried to drown out the image. But that night, every time he closed his eyes, he saw that same empty chair, that same faint outline. 2 days later, he came home from work to find a small envelope in his mailbox. No return address. Inside, a single Polaroid photo. The picture showed the house across the street. The upstairs window glowed faintly yellow. Only now, there was something else in the frame. His own house, his own front porch, and through the blinds, the silhouette of a man, standing perfectly still inside his living room. He dropped the photo. It wasn't possible. He hadn't been home. No one had a key. As the photo slid to the floor, Michael noticed handwriting on the back. Shaky, almost carved into the surface. "Keep the light on." He looked up through the blinds. The lamp across the street flickered once, and for the first time he thought he saw someone moving behind it. Michael stopped sleeping. Nights blurred together. He would sit by his living room window, the blinds half open, staring at that one glowing window across the street. Every time he tried to look away, something in him twitched. A pull deep and irrational, urging him to keep watching. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It was compulsion. Sometimes, in the soft flicker of the lamp, he thought he saw movement. A slow sway, a faint shadow crossing behind the curtain. Once, he even convinced himself that whoever was in there was waving. He laughed it off, poured another drink, told himself he was losing it. But when he went to bed, he dreamed of light. Always that same light, humming faintly, like an electric heartbeat behind the wall. On the 5th night after the photo arrived, Michael made a decision. He told himself he just needed to know. Maybe the house was abandoned, maybe some prankster was squatting there. Whatever it was, it couldn't be worse than the not knowing. He waited until 2 a.m. The street was empty. Rain had started again, thin and cold, tapping against his jacket as he crossed to the other side. The grass in the yard was tall and wet. His shoes sank slightly into the mud. Up close, the house looked even worse. Paint flaking off, wooden boards rotting. The light upstairs buzzed softly, like a dying fly. The front door was locked, but the frame was weak. One shove and it gave way with a hollow crack. Inside, darkness. The air smelled like dust and mold, like something left too long to rot. He swept his flashlight around. Faded wallpaper, overturned chair, an empty picture frame hanging crookedly. The hum he'd heard before was louder here, a low mechanical thrum that seemed to come from beneath the floor. He followed the sound up the staircase. Each step groaned. The closer he got to the 2nd floor, the more his heart pounded. The door to the lit room stood slightly open. He pushed it with one finger. The lamp was there, burning the same steady yellow. Beside it, a wooden chair, empty. And facing the chair, on the opposite wall, a large, cracked mirror. For a moment, Michael only saw himself, pale, drenched, breathing hard. Then he noticed something wrong. The reflection of the lamp was still on, but in the reflection, the lamp's shade was tilted. Slightly different. The chair wasn't empty. He turned around. The room was exactly as it was. Empty. Still. When he looked back, the reflection had changed again. Now there was someone standing behind him in the mirror. He spun around, swinging the flashlight wildly. Nothing. Only the quiet hum of the bulb. The fear in his chest felt almost electric. He backed away toward the door. And that's when he saw the photographs. Pinned to the wall beside the doorway were dozens of Polaroids, curling with age. Every one of them showed the same scene. His house, his porch, his living room window. In some, he was outside mowing the lawn. In others, he was sitting at his computer. And in the last one, taken from the angle of this very room, he was standing exactly where he stood now, looking at the wall of photos. In the picture, there was someone behind him, someone holding a camera. The lamp flickered. The hum grew louder. Then, without warning, the light went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Michael froze, listening. His own breathing was too loud. And then, footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the hallway. One step, another. And then they stopped, right outside the door. He whispered, "Who's there?" Silence. Then, from the darkness beyond the doorway, came a voice, low, cracked, barely human. "Keep the light on." The door creaked. Something brushed his sleeve. Michael bolted. Down the stairs, through the hallway, out into the rain. He didn't stop running until he was back inside his own house, locking every door, every window, turning on every light he had. He stayed awake until morning. When the sun finally rose, he dared to look across the street again. The window in the blue house was dark. For the first time since he'd moved in, the light was gone. Days passed. Michael tried to convince himself it was over. Maybe the wiring had finally failed. Maybe the house had collapsed. The police, when he called anonymously, said they'd look into it. But at night, when the city fell quiet, he still felt it. That hum, somewhere deep in his walls, faint and rhythmic. Then one evening, just after midnight, the power in his house flickered. The living room lamp buzzed faintly, then turned itself on. Soft amber light filled the room, the same shade as the lamp across the street. And reflected in his window, he saw what he feared most, a figure, standing behind him in the dark. He turned slowly. The last thing he saw was the faint flash of a camera. And then, darkness. Ethan Miller had never minded working late. For years, he'd done security jobs, empty offices, construction sites, deserted parking lots. It paid the bills, and he liked the quiet. When he got the call from Dawson Logistics, a small shipping company on the industrial edge of Seattle, the offer sounded easy. Night security guard, 12 to 8, nothing fancy. Just keep an eye on the loading docks and make hourly patrols. The warehouse was massive, a hollow steel box that swallowed sound. During the day it buzzed with forklifts and shouting, but at night, when Ethan arrived, it was like a tomb. Rows of metal shelves stretched into darkness, red emergency lights blinking faintly in the distance. His little office sat by the main gate. One desk, 2 monitors connected to the security cameras, a coffee maker, and a chair that squeaked if he breathed too hard. At first, the job was dull in the best way. He'd walk the aisles, check the locks, jot the times into a logbook. Sometimes he'd hear the wind knocking against the metal siding, or a stray cat scurrying under the pallets. But about a week in, he noticed something strange on the monitors. At 2:17 a.m., one of the cameras, Cam 4 near the loading dock, flickered. Just static for a second, then the image returned. Only now, the big rolling door was slightly open, maybe a foot high. He frowned. He was sure it had been closed during his last patrol. He grabbed his flashlight and went to check. Outside, the air was sharp and cold. The parking lot was empty, stretching to a dark tree line. The rolling door looked normal, shut tight. He knelt, ran his fingers along the bottom edge. The metal was cold, locked. He went back to the office, shaking his head. Probably just a camera glitch. But when he sat down, Cam 4 flickered again. And for a split second before the static cleared, he could have sworn he saw a person standing in the far corner of the dock. The next night, he told himself he wouldn't look at that camera again. Paranoia, lack of sleep. But halfway through his shift, his eyes drifted back to the monitor out of habit. 17 a.m. The same glitch, the same flicker. Only this time, the rolling door was wide open, and the camera, somehow, had tilted slightly as if someone had touched it. Ethan stared at the screen, not breathing. The picture was grainy, shadows thick, but he could make out movement. Something small. A shape slipping past the door and vanishing into the darkness of the shelves. He snatched his flashlight and radio, heart hammering. "Control, this is Site 12, he said, though there was no control. The line went straight to voicemail after 10 p.m. He just needed to hear his own voice. His boots echoed through the aisles. Rows and rows of stacked crates loomed like walls. The silence was heavy, broken only by the hum of distant machinery. "Anyone here?" he called out. Nothing. He reached the dock. The door was closed again, the lock untouched. He pulled on it hard. Secure. He turned slowly, light sweeping across the floor. Then he froze. There were wet footprints leading away from the door. Small, barefoot. They stopped about 10 feet in front of him and disappeared. Ethan didn't report it. He knew how it would sound. Night guard alone, seeing things in the dark. But every night after that, he caught himself watching Cam 4, 2:17. Always the same time. Always the same flicker. One night, the glitch came early. 2:10. The camera buzzed, and he leaned closer to the screen. This time, the figure wasn't on the dock. It was standing in the next aisle, between the shelves, closer, facing the camera directly. The feed cut to static. When it came back, the figure was gone. But on the edge of the screen, Ethan could see something written on the floor, faintly illuminated by the emergency light. Words. He switched to the other camera covering that area, zoomed in. The words were smeared like written with something wet. 4 shaky letters. Help. He sat motionless, staring at the screen until dawn. And when the morning shift arrived, they found him still there. Coffee cold, eyes red, the monitors still on. Cam 4 was blank, just static. Ethan told himself he wouldn't come back. After that night, The footprints, the word help on the concrete. He wanted to quit, turn in his badge, and never set foot in that warehouse again. But when the day manager called, cheerful as ever, saying they were short on coverage, he heard himself agreeing. He didn't tell her what he'd seen. He just said, "Yeah, I can take another shift." When he arrived that evening, the air inside felt colder than usual. The hum of the fluorescents was sharp, metallic. Somewhere in the distance, a fan clicked irregularly, like a slow heartbeat. He poured coffee, sat at the desk, and stared at the monitor wall. Every camera was fine, crisp, quiet, still, except Cam 4. It was black, dead feed. He opened the maintenance log. The camera had been serviced earlier that day. He replayed the feed from the previous night. Nothing but static. Yet at 2:17 a.m., the static glitched, just for half a second. And he saw it again, the shape in the aisle. Blurry, facing the camera. Then the image froze, and another frame flickered up. One that shouldn't exist. The figure was closer now, almost against the lens. The face, blurred beyond recognition, like a smudge. And beneath the frozen image, a timestamp, live. He yanked the cable out of the monitor. The screen stayed on for a few seconds, glowing faintly, then went black. Ethan tried to focus on the routine. Hourly patrol, log entries, lock checks. By the time the clock hit 1:50, his nerves were tight. He told himself he wouldn't look at the monitors anymore. Just one last walk, then coffee, then daylight. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped into the aisles. The air was heavy, thick with dust. The rows of shelves felt endless, like a maze. Every sound echoed back. The creak of his boots, the faint clang of distant pipes. He turned a corner and froze. Something lay on the ground in front of him, a security badge, his own. But his was clipped to his jacket. He picked it up. The photo was the same. The name, too. Only the date printed at the bottom read May 14th, 2019, 3 years ago. He wasn't even working here 3 years ago. A chill ran down his spine. He dropped the badge and backed away, light trembling in his hand. Somewhere behind him, metal scraped. He turned sharply. Nothing, just darkness between the shelves. Then faintly, a sound came through the silence. Knocking, slow, deliberate, from the direction of the loading dock. He forced himself to move step by step toward Cam 4's area. The knocking grew louder. 3 short knocks. Pause. 3 again. When he reached the dock, the huge rolling door was halfway open. Cold air poured in from outside, carrying the smell of rain and rust. "Who's there?" he called. No answer. He aimed the flashlight at the opening. The beam hit empty space. Then something rolled out from the shadows. A small cassette tape, scuffed and wet. He picked it up. A piece of masking tape was stuck to its side. Written in shaky black marker, "Play me." Back in the office, Ethan found an old tape deck on a shelf. Probably from years ago, when they still used analog security systems. He hesitated, then slid the tape in and pressed play. A low hiss filled the room. Then a faint voice. At first, just breathing. Then, words. "This place isn't empty. They keep it locked up. Below. If someone finds this, don't stay past 2. The voice was male, tired, strained. There was a scraping sound, like dragging metal. Then, they said it was just storage. But there's... The tape cut off with a burst of static. Ethan stared at the machine. He rewound and played it again. The same. The voice ended mid-sentence. He fast-forwarded to the end, and nearly dropped the player. The last 3 seconds weren't static. They were the faint sound of knocking. 3 short knocks. Pause. 3 again. He looked up at the monitors. Cam 4, which had been black all night, suddenly flickered on. The image was live. The loading dock. And in the doorway stood a figure, facing the camera. Motionless. Barefoot. Ethan reached for the phone, but his hand froze halfway. On the desk beside him lay his own badge, the one from 3 years ago. Only now, the photo on it was different. It was taken from above, like a still frame from a security feed. And behind him, barely visible in the corner, was the same figure from the dock. The lights in the warehouse flickered. Once. Twice. Then everything went dark. When the day crew arrived at 8:05 a.m., the security office was empty. The monitors were off. The only thing on the desk was a coffee mug, half full, and a cassette tape, still spinning. The recording played faintly through the static. "This place isn't empty. Don't stay past 2. When Claire Peterson moved into apartment 3B, she was just looking for silence. Her previous place had been a nightmare. Neighbors fighting through the walls, sirens at all hours, the kind of noise that made you forget what quiet even sounded like. The new building was old, but solid, thick concrete walls, narrow hallways, and a rent she could actually afford. The landlord, a polite man named Mr. Grady, handed her the keys and said, "You'll like it here. The tenants upstairs keep to themselves." She smiled, grateful. Privacy was all she wanted. For the first few weeks, the place was perfect. She worked from home as a transcriptionist, typing interviews all day with her headphones on. The sounds of the building blended into the background. A faint hum from the pipes, a door closing down the hall, footsteps above her at odd hours. The people upstairs, whoever they were, seemed quiet. Too quiet. Sometimes she heard them walking late at night, long after midnight. Soft, slow steps. Not pacing, just moving. Occasionally a faint thud, like furniture scraping. Nothing alarming, just enough to remind her she wasn't alone. Then, one night around 2 a.m., she woke to a sound that didn't fit. A whisper. At first, she thought she was dreaming, but when she sat up, the voice continued. Faint, rhythmic, coming from the ceiling. She couldn't make out the words, but it was definitely speech. Male, low, deliberate. Another voice joined it. Female, softer, almost a murmur. She pressed her ear to the plaster. The words were too muffled to understand, but the tone was wrong. Cold, methodical, like someone rehearsing something. Then silence. The next morning she went upstairs, determined to introduce herself. Apartment 4B's door was unmarked, paint flaking around the frame. She knocked gently, no answer. She waited, then knocked again. Still nothing. When she leaned close, she thought she heard faint movement inside. A shuffle, like fabric dragging on the floor. But whoever was there didn't open. Claire left a note. "Hi, I'm your downstairs neighbor. Just wanted to say hello." And slipped it under the door. That night, the whispering returned. Over the next week, the noises grew more distinct. Sometimes it was laughter, quiet, almost polite. Sometimes a dragging sound, like something heavy being moved. Once, when she paused her typing, she realized the rhythm of the footsteps above perfectly matched the sound of her own keystrokes, as if someone upstairs was mimicking her. It began to bother her. She recorded a few clips on her phone to prove she wasn't imagining it. The playback, though, was strange. Faint, static, distorted breathing, but no voices. When she mentioned it casually to Mr. Grady, he frowned. "There's no one in 4B right now," he said. Claire blinked. "What do you mean?" "I hear them every night," he sighed. "It's been vacant for months. Some plumbing issue. No one's rented it since spring." She laughed, waiting for him to smile. He didn't. That evening she couldn't concentrate. Every creak made her jump. She turned on all the lights, locked the door twice, tried to drown out her thoughts with music. But around midnight the pattern started again. Soft thuds from above, moving slowly from one corner of the ceiling to the other. She texted her friend Jenna. "You ever had neighbors that sound like they're walking in your head?" No reply. At 2:43 a.m. there was a knock. 3 slow taps. Not at her door. From inside the ceiling, the plaster trembled lightly. Dust drifting down. Claire stood frozen, staring upward. Then came another knock. Lower this time, right above where she stood. She backed away, heart hammering. The air felt heavy, thick. Then, faintly, a whisper filtered through again. Clearer now, close to her ear, though it came from above. "We're still here." She didn't sleep. At dawn, she went back upstairs. The door to 4B stood slightly open. Inside was darkness. No furniture, no smell of life. Just a layer of dust on the floor, thick enough to show her footprints. In the center of the room sat a single wooden chair. On the wall opposite, written faintly in chalk, were words that made her throat go dry. "Stop typing." She ran. Back in her apartment, she locked the door, shaking. The note she had left under 4B's door the day before now lay on her own kitchen table. Someone had drawn a smiley face on it, over her name, in black marker. Claire didn't go to work the next day. She couldn't focus, couldn't eat, couldn't stop thinking about what she'd seen upstairs. The chalk message. Her own note returned to her apartment. Someone had been inside. She called the landlord again. "Mr. Grady, you said 4B was empty," she said, her voice shaking. He paused. It is empty. I was there just last week. There's someone in there now. Silence. Then, Miss Peterson, you're not the first tenant to say that. He wouldn't explain further. Just said he'd check it out. He didn't call back. That night, she tried to stay awake. She sat at her desk, laptop open, the glow of the screen the only light in the room. She turned on a sound recorder, just in case. Midnight passed. Nothing. At 1:30, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop recording. She froze. Her heart thudded so hard she could feel it in her teeth. She typed back, "Who is this?" No reply. She muted her phone and unplugged the router. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe someone hacked something. But a part of her knew. Whoever it was, they were close. She turned up the volume on the recorder, and then she heard it. Faint breathing, not hers. The ceiling above her gave a soft groan. She looked up. Dust drifted down. Then came another whisper, closer now, as if someone was crouched right above the plaster. You shouldn't have gone upstairs. The next morning, she packed a bag and went to stay at Jenna's place across town. But even there, sleep didn't come easy. Her phone buzzed again that night. A photo message. It was her own apartment. 3B, shot from the doorway. The timestamp read 1 hour ago. In the picture, the chair at her desk was pulled out, and on the wall above the laptop someone had written in black marker. Still typing. Claire's breath caught. She called the police. When they arrived at her apartment, the message was gone. The wall was clean. No sign of forced entry, no fingerprints. One officer, trying to be kind, suggested she take some rest. Maybe exhaustion, maybe stress. They left. But when she looked under her doormat after they were gone, she found a folded piece of paper. Her note, again, same handwriting, same black marker. This time there was no smiley face. Just one word, listen. The following days blurred together. She barely left the apartment, convinced someone was always one step ahead. Watching, waiting. She began to notice small changes. Things moved half an inch on the counter. Lights turned off that she swore she'd left on, and always. Around 2 a.m., the faintest creak above her. She tried earplugs. White noise, sleeping pills, nothing helped. Eventually, in a panic, she called Mr. Grady again, demanding he let her see the building's maintenance records. After a long silence, he sighed. Miss Peterson, 4B was sealed 2 years ago. What are you talking about? There was an incident. A couple lived there. Quiet people, never any trouble. One night, the husband attacked his wife. No one heard a thing until the smell started. The unit's been locked since. Claire felt her stomach turn. Then why do I hear— He cut her off. There's nothing up there. That night, she didn't turn on the lights. She sat on the floor, back against the wall, staring at the ceiling. The whispers began again. Soft, calm, almost conversational. She pressed record on her phone, whispering, "What do you want?" The answer came slow and clear. "We don't want anything. We just don't like the noise." A faint scratching followed. Wood on plaster, moving across the ceiling toward the far corner. The recorder picked up something else then. Another voice, lower, male. "Stop typing." Her laptop screen flickered. The cursor on the open document began to move. By itself. Letters appeared one by one, as if typed by unseen hands. "We're still here." The screen went black. Claire dropped the phone, back toward the door. But the lock wouldn't turn. She yanked, twisted, stuck. Above her, the ceiling cracked. A thin line of plaster fell, dust scattering like ash. And through that new gap, she saw a sliver of light. Cold, fluorescent, the color of an empty hallway. Then, footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving away. When the landlord opened 3B the next morning, the apartment was empty. The furniture still there, coffee cup half full, laptop on the table. The file open on the screen was a transcript, unfinished. The last line read, indistinct whispering, male and female voices. Overlapping, subject breathes rapidly, typing stops, and then nothing. The apartment upstairs remained sealed. The building stayed quiet, too quiet.